Hi, welcome back. I am Antoinette van Graan, as always, and this week we will be reviewing Zakes Mda, The Heart of Redness. Yes, for some reason, the author is more important than the title. He is one of the biggest South African authors that we have. He writes mostly contemporary, and this is the first book of his that I am going to be reviewing, and it's complicated. So let's start at the very beginning. Heart of Redness is contemporary with elements of a historic novel in it. It jumps between two time periods, one in modern South Africa and one in our colonial past. So I think it's somewhere in between of there. So the sugar is definitely the history. You sort of get things from two sides. You jump perspectives from the historical point of view between the two twins who started this feud in the first place, and it's sort of good to see that there's a gray. There are two sides to every battle, and history is written by the victors, but that doesn't mean that the losers never had a story to tell. So I think as far as this story is able to tell a good story from both sides, it did that. It's definitely fair to either sides of history, the winners and the losers. Then the vinegar is the characters. There's not much to say about them because they were plain and boring and shallow. They're really not something you're going to remember. Then, would I recommend this book? No. It's 3 stars from me. It's an okay novel, but it wasn't very enjoyable. It wasn't terrible. It was by no means terrible. But it was just very middle grade, and that's just not good enough. If you're very interested in the history and the historic and political perspectives, I think go for it. If you already know what the novel is about and you're interested in that sort of history, don't let me dissuade you. I think because of the lack of texts accurately depicting that part of South Africa's history, this novel is valuable because of that. And it's probably the only place where you will get an accurate depiction of the cultural and political situations that arose from the cattle killing and the cattle slaughter that happened, which I will get to in the spoiler section. But I think it's valuable in that if you're looking for a fun contemporary or something with some real drama and real conflict in it and interesting characters. And no, I don't think honestly that I'll ever recommend any book that I've given under 4 stars. It's just there's so much out there to read that's just so much better. I can't suggest you waste your time on this. Okay, spoiler section. Here we get to a serious pet peeve of mine. You might disagree with me on this. I don't know if there's any theory underpinning why it is done this way, but it frustrates the hell out of me every time I see this in a book. So, the book is written in English. That's why I could understand it. But the narrative is written in Xhosa. So that means that the characters all speak that language. They think in that language. Everybody is that language, except for like a handful of people here and there. But everything is translated for me to be able to consume it in English. And then they throw in random Xhosa words here and there and offer an explanation. It's not an explanation that our point of view would have required, since he is a Xhosa speaking man himself. He doesn't need to think in his head, oh, just for in case the brainworms I have need to know what this word is in Xhosa, I'm going to translate it. It doesn't make sense within the realm you're building. Either I am part of this world fully or I'm not. And throwing in these foreign words into an English text without having a reason for them to be there throws me out completely. And the thing is, there is kind of a reason. And that comes back to the Death of the Author discussion that we had last week. I'll put a link up in the tab if I can figure that out. This was obviously the author's intention, that it should be accessible to an international audience and that you should get a taste, get a flavor of the culture here. And if you wanted to write a book encapsulating all the culture of all 4 Xhosas, about their culture, everything, then you should have written it completely in that language. But to do this tasting, it completely others the people we're supposed to be relating to. It puts them in a realm outside of our understanding. I wanted to read this book about the cattle killings and about everything that happened so that I could understand what it was like to be one of them, but now you're putting us apart. So I am different from you, you are different from me, and it's othering you. Often in fantasy novels, it'll be the case that you add foreign words so that people feel like, oh, this is magical, this is wonderful, this is different from our world. And if you want people to understand you, I don't know, it's just really a pet peeve of mine. Am I this Xhosa man walking around in the village and interacting with these people? Or am I an Afrikaans girl standing on the outside reading in English what happened to the Xhosas long ago? From a textual perspective, it just completely rips me out, and I hate it. I don't want to think about who I am. I want to experience what this is. So to summarize, I guess what my frustration is what's the point? Was this a fully Xhosa text written from the Xhosa perspective, from that historical narrative, and translated for my benefit so that other people can understand what it is? In which case, everything should be translated into English, the entire experience, because the whole experience is being translated. Or is it something to teach outsiders about the Xhosa experience, and then why isn't the main character an outsider that gets to learn? There are different ways to do it than just randomly throwing knowledge that a character should already know at the reader. It's just So if this was meant to be a Xhosa narrative from the Xhosa perspective for their own people, why not just write the whole book in Xhosa? Why publish in English? If it's not meant for me and I'm supposed to feel like an outsider, why? And it's strange because the end of the novel and the decision they make to not make Xhosa tradition and culture fetishized is kind of contradicted by honestly just authorial intention that forces this othering of a culture that should be as easy as breathing, natural in this world. Maybe it's just me. I have to admit, I have not seen this critique anywhere else before, but it frustrates the hell out of me every time I come across it. Even in fantasy novels, where I kind of understand the point a little bit more, if I am supposed to be a magical woodland creature, then my own language does not need to be explained to me. Let me live in the character. Or else, don't make it first person perspective. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels like this, but I think it's clear I feel very strongly about it. And then, now that he has committed this act upon the text and completely ripped me out of it and made me question the author's intent, which I don't like doing. I don't like thinking about the author while I'm reading. The consistency gets jumbled, and then every time I have to relive this trauma of being ripped out of a story, where for chapters and chapters everything was full English, and then all of a sudden, boop, up pops another word to give us that taste of Xhosa, because we weren't living in their world already. These things should not be strange to a character who has lived their entire lives here. It just ruins the perspective. It's like head hopping, except I'm hopping entirely out of the book. And that inconsistency seeps into other parts of the novel. The beliefs, some of the traditional beliefs are treated with reverence and respect and are taken very seriously. And then other beliefs are treated as childish and foolish. And it's not for me to say whether it's disrespectful to that culture. I honestly am not completely in the know about it, but it just seems inconsistent, and definitely, again, authorial intent and bias is coming through, and I don't like the taste. So through all of this, we see not the Xhosa people from this specific Xhosa character's perspective. We sort of see it as if Zakes Mda is telling us how to see this story, how to see the culture, how to see everything. The beliefs, there's no arguments back and forth. There's just, this belief is valid, this belief is stupid. There's no arguments. There's no reasoning behind it. It's just Zakes Mda is God, and his will reign. And as I said, I hate needing to interact with the author while I'm reading. So, if you didn't know already, this book is about the cattle killing that happened in South Africa's colonial past. The Xhosa people were a strong and powerful, I guess, nation of their own. They had their own borders, and they were strong enough to stand firm against the empire that was the Zulu kingdom that was growing on their doorstep. And it's difficult to explain exactly what happened because it's kind of complicated. But basically, some of their religious prophets prophesied that all their enemies would be washed away or defeated if they gave their gods a great offering. And that offering would be to kill all the cattle, their main source of food, and burn all the crops. And then there were a couple of problems. So most of them did it. They killed their cattle and they trampled the crops and they burned the crops and destroyed everything. But then there was a handful of people who didn't quite believe in this. And when all was said and done, they never killed their cattle and they never burned the crops. And so the prophet said, "The gods are angry with you. How dare you not have listened? Because of these unbelievers, the gods won't come. They won't help you because you have failed them, because there are unbelievers in your midst and they're disgusted by you." Which, makes sense, but you can also kind of see how this will end very badly. Half of the population no longer has any food, any future. They're just waiting on the gods to deliver their promise. And the other half are living quite prosperously, but are the cause that the gods won't deliver their promise. So of course, a great divide happens in the whole nation. They're completely weakened and open to attack from all sides, from the British colonists, from the Zulu kingdom. Just it completely crushed them. And it's honestly a part of history that I've always found really fascinating about the the psychology of those people, and like, what must it have felt like to be in that situation, to legitimately believe that this was a command from the gods, and at the same time also to know that the risks involved would be devastating. So I love the historical context, so I was fascinating to deal with it. So the plot switches between the historical characters and what happened to them during the time of the great cattle slaughter, and then it switches to today and how there's still a feud between the families who believed and committed to the slaughter, and the families who didn't and prospered afterwards. And obviously there's still some feuding going on there, and politically it's very interesting to see how this divide is trying to be bridged in modern times. It's very interesting to see how this divide is attempting to be bridged in modern times, but it's so complicated and it's so heavy with historical trauma and baggage that it seems an impossible task. And so there's a lot of debate about how to approach the future. Does the future keep to their traditions that have failed them to a certain extent? Or is the path forward to ignore tradition, ignore the heart of redness, and just modernize, westernize? And it's a really, really complicated subject, and it's a really, really difficult thing to deal with. Do you throw away who your ancestors were in order to adapt to a modern world, or is there some way to mix the two? Or do you fiercely fight off modernity and stick to your traditions and stick to who you are? It's handled. I wouldn't say it's handled well, though. So our main character is an educated man from America. He was born in South Africa, but he got his doctorate in America. And he watches the debates between the believers and the unbelievers. And the problem is there are no arguments on either side. It's just, we think this because history, and the other side says we think this because future. And there's never any argument. And in the end, Kamangu, I think that's how it's pronounced, the main character, he just kind of declares that this is the best way to go. Some people agree with him, some people disagree with him. And he doesn't have to give an argument. He is just right, and we should believe him. He's right because he's educated from America. I'm sorry, what does this American man... Okay, he was born in South Africa, but educated in America. What does he know about this? And why is he necessarily right? And why is everybody listening to him? It seems a bit forced, the ending. There's some minor explanations, but it does seem very forced, and as if a man with a PhD will come in and solve everybody's problems one day. And it seems like this is way too complicated to be fixed by one man. One man who honestly has just kind of kept himself out of it, and then at the end just makes a decision. I think I could use this analogy. The characters in Heart of Redness are a little bit like chess pieces. Their only value is the positions they represent. So this man is the chief of the unbelievers, and his family is this, and then his wife betrays him, and that's bad because she wants to go towards the believers' side now. And there's no actual emotional stakes. It's just all political. And yeah, everybody's just, their opinions makes who they are. And some of their background and some of their family and some of their situation informs those opinions, but there's never any deep emotional stake involved here, as you would really think there would be. I mean, I can just imagine, or I know for a fact in my own culture, in Afrikaans culture, the arguments, the fights, the deep emotional drive behind, should we modernize completely or should we kind of stick to who we are? Should we throw away Afrikaans as a language because it's not an international language? Or should we just should we capitulate to English? Or should we stick to our guns and fight for our culture, our heritage, as meager as it may be compared to the world? Just, I don't know. I mean, I feel like compared to the devastation caused by the cattle killing and the trauma that must have followed, emotions should have been running a lot higher than this. I just think pieces were placed on the board and then it was like, fight. There was no care taken in crafting each piece. It's probably more like checkers. I won't remember any of these characters, but I will remember the story. So that was my takes. Okay, so that was my take on Heart of Redness by Zakes Mda. Now, I know there are some of you out there who will say, see, South African fiction, or South African literature as a whole, it sucks and it can't be better. And may I just remind you that J.R.R. Tolkien was born in Bloemfontein. Just because I don't like this book, and I don't think I'll pick up another Zakes Mda specifically, doesn't mean South African literature doesn't have a future. So please don't take that away from this. I think we've been focusing very much on contemporary, apartheid, our current situations. But I know I'm writing a fantasy based on somewhat South African landscape. I know of people writing about African future. What would happen if Africa were to all of a sudden take the lead, and in 50 years' time, South Africa is the leader of the world. Africa is America. Africa is the one to beat, the one to look up to. What would that world look like? So don't lose hope just yet. I think South African literature definitely had a good start. We have a lot of natural storytellers at our disposal, and we have a lot of stories to tell. I just think maybe it's time to move beyond the stories of the past and move into stories about the future and what could be. Hope, magic, that's what I want to see. Even if the publishers might not, I think we should go for it, and I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for any South African authors who write anything other than contemporary or historic. I want to see the next. I want to see the future, and I'm really, really hopeful about it. I know a lot of writers, and I know what they can do. So, the future's not so bleak.